Hello there, welcome to the program. You're with Arise News, and ahead over the next 30 minutes, all the global headlines you need to know about. You're watching Arise News now from our newsroom in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, and I'm Folake Adesugba. Our top story is now, it's a joke and a farce. President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, denies allegations of sexual assault, referring to them as a comic drama. Plus, sliding down despite IMF's record loan, Argentina's peso continues to fall amid continuing economic challenges. And in sports, Germany, former European champions, wins right to host the 2024 European Championships. Now we begin in Capitol Hill, of course, a top story that's still brewing fresh. Washington, where Brett Kavanaugh, moments ago the man nominated to fill a vacant position in the Supreme Court, has emphatically denied allegations of sexual assault, calling them a joke and a farce. Now, Kavanaugh made the statements while testifying Thursday before the Senate Judiciary Committee following allegations by Christine Blasey Ford that he sexually assaulted her in high school. Kavanaugh was referring specifically to allegations by Julie Swetnick, whose name and allegations became public Wednesday, a day before hearings. Swetnick said in a sworn statement that she witnessed Kavanaugh consistently engage in excessive drinking and inappropriate contact of a sexual nature with women in the early 1980s. Of course, we followed the whole trial, and after listening to Ford, we didn't exactly know how he was going to come back, but he came back strong, and let's have a listen at what he had to say.
You know, Senator, I'll do whatever the committee wants. I wanted a hearing the day after the allegation came up. I wanted to be here that day. Instead, 10 days passed where all this nonsense is coming out. You know, that I'm in gangs, I'm on boats in Rhode Island, I'm in Colorado, you know, I'm cited all over the place. And these things are printed and run breathlessly by cable news. You know, I wanted a hearing the next day. My family's been destroyed by this, Senator. Destroyed. And whoever wants, you know, whatever the committee decides, you know, I'm all in immediately. I'm all in immediately.
And what you're saying, if I understand it, is that the allegations by Dr. Ford, Ms. Ramirez, and Ms. Swetnick are wrong.
Yeah, that is emphatically what I'm saying. Emphatically. The Swetnick thing is a joke. That is a farce.
Now, if you'd watched that, you'd noticed, of course, that most Republicans were more focused on the whole idea that it's a political sham to destroy his reputation before his swearing in. Now, meanwhile, Christine Blasey Ford, the woman who's accused Brett Kavanaugh, says the incident, which occurred 36 years ago, has drastically affected her life. Mrs. Ford, who was speaking at the Senate hearing, said she came before the Senate Judiciary Committee not because she wanted to, but because she believed it's her civic duty. She says that the assault has been seared into her memory and has haunted her.
This assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details. I did not want to tell my parents that I, at age 15, was in a house without any parents present, drinking beer with boys. I convinced myself that because Brett did not rape me, I should just move on and just pretend that it didn't happen. Over the years, I told very, very few friends that I had this traumatic experience. I told my husband before we were married that I had experienced a sexual assault. I had never told the details to anyone, the specific details, until May 2012 during a couples counseling session. The reason this came up in counseling is that my husband and I had completed a very extensive, very long remodel of our home, and I insisted on a second front door, an idea that he and others disagreed with and could not understand. In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail. I recall saying that the boy who assaulted me could someday be on the U.S. Supreme Court and spoke a bit about his background at an elitist all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland. My husband recalls that I named my attacker as Brett Kavanaugh. After that May 2012 therapy session, I did my best to ignore the memories of the assault because recounting them caused me to relive the experience and caused panic and anxiety. Occasionally, I would discuss the assault in an individual therapy session, but talking about it caused more reliving of the trauma, so I tried not to think about it or discuss it. But over the years, I went through periods where I thought about the attack. I had confided in some close friends that I had had an experience with sexual assault. Occasionally, I stated that my assailant was a prominent lawyer or judge, but I did not use his name. I do not recall each person I spoke to about Brett's assault, and some friends have reminded me of these conversations since the publication of the Washington Post story on September 16, 2018. But until July 2018, I had never named Mr. Kavanaugh as my attacker outside of therapy. I saw press reports stating that Brett Kavanaugh was on the short list of a list of very well-qualified Supreme Court nominees. I thought it was my civic duty to relay the information I had about Mr. Kavanaugh's conduct so that those considering his nomination would know about this assault. On July 6th, I had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President as soon as possible before a nominee was selected. I did not know how specifically to do this. I called my congressional representative and let her receptionist know that someone on the President's shortlist had attacked me. I also sent a message to the encrypted Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland. This was an extremely hard thing for me to do, but I felt that I couldn't not do it. Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland.
So I'll just ask you very plainly, Dr. Ford, is there a political motivation for your coming forward with your account of the assault by Brett Kavanaugh?
No, and I'd like to reiterate that, again, I was trying to get the information to you while there was still a list of other,
Thank you.
what looked like equally qualified candidates.
It was really emotional in the hearing room, and of course people were moved to tears if you looked in the room. Now, moments after the marathon Senate hearing over Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh wrapped up, naturally, President Trump tweeted his support for his embattled pick. Trump said on Twitter, Judge Kavanaugh showed America exactly why I nominated him. His testimony was powerful, honest, and riveting. Democrats' search and destroy strategy is disgraceful, and this process has been a total sham, an effort to delay, obstruct, and resist. The Senate must vote. Well, let's move away from all of that now. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the world stands at the dawn of a new day in relations with North Korea. He told the UN Security Council that President Trump's diplomatic breakthrough with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has led to a point where the nuclear threat from the country could soon be resolved. But he stressed that international sanctions against North Korea must continue to be vigorously enforced if the diplomacy is to be successful.
Time and time again, over the past quarter century, the United Nations has made it clear. The world cannot accept a nuclear-armed North Korea. That's not just the United States' position, that is the world's position. Past diplomatic attempts to halt North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile development were unsuccessful. But now we're at the dawn of a new day. We must not forget what's brought us this far, the historic international pressure campaign that this Council has made possible through the sanctions that it imposed. Until the final denuclearization of the DPRK is achieved and fully verified, It is our solemn collective responsibility to fully implement all UN Security Council resolutions pertaining to North Korea. The United States has assessed, and we can say in no uncertain terms, that the cap of 500,000 barrels has been breached this year. We continue to see illegal imports of additional refined petroleum using ship-to-ship transfers, which are clearly prohibited under the UN resolution. As UN Security Council members, we must convey to the captains of these ships, to their owners, and anyone else involved in these transfers we are watching them, and that they must cease their illicit activity. We must all be accountable for cutting off North Korea's illegal coal exports, which provide funds that go directly to its WMD programs. And we must be accountable, too, for curbing the number of North Korean laborers permitted within our borders. The United States is troubled by recent reports that member states, including members of the Security Council, are hosting new North Korean laborers. The path to peace and a brighter future is only through diplomacy and only denuclearization. That means any other path North Korea may choose will inevitably lead to ever-increasing isolation and pressure. It is imperative for members of the United Nations to take that to heart. Enforcement of UN Security Council sanctions must continue vigorously and without fail until we realize the fully, final, verified denuclearization.
Meanwhile, China is urging the United Nations Security Council to consider easing sanctions on North Korea as it moves forward towards the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, says easing sanctions will encourage North Korea to move forward more quickly.
我们将坚定支持朝韩双方
China applauds the political decisiveness of the two countries in turning their leaders' consensus into concrete actions and building mutual trust and in advancing reconciliation and cooperation on the peninsula. There is a provision in the Security Council resolutions that the Council is prepared to modify the sanction measures in light of the DPRK's compliance. Now, given the positive developments in the inter-Korean and the DPRK-US relations, and the DPRK's important pledges and actions on the denuclearization, China believes that the Security Council needs to consider invoking in due course this provision to encourage the DPRK and other relevant countries to move denuclearization further ahead.
And elsewhere, about 100 people protested against embattled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in front of the United Nations on Thursday, a day after Maduro showed up unexpectedly at the UN General Assembly. Maduro said he was defending his country as 6 nations accused him of crimes against humanity, and US President Donald Trump hinted at taking military action. The surprise visit came after Maduro threatened to skip the global gathering, citing fears he could be assassinated as his once wealthy OPEC nation spirals into a brutal economic crisis and international pressure mounts for the socialist leader to step down. It's the first time that member countries have referred another country to the Netherlands-based UN court.
We're not going to let the Maduro regime backed by Cuba hurt the Venezuelan people anymore. So I will tell you, I'm going to be loud, President Trump's going to be loud, the United States is going to be loud, and Maduro will hear us because we won't stop talking until we see Maduro go. Keep your voices loud. We love you, we thank you, and we won't give up the fight. God bless you.
I'm here because my country needs to be free. The guy who claims to be the president, he's not our president, he's just a criminal. That's a cartel. That guy deals with drugs, with everything, and we are here, we are forced to be here in this country just because of him.
Meanwhile, Iran's president says the UN Security Council meeting chaired by President Trump yesterday reflects America's increasing isolation in the international community. Speaking to reporters at Tehran's airport after returning from New York, where he addressed the UN General Assembly, Hassan Rouhani said that the US is in a unique historical and political isolation.
The special United Nations Security Council meeting, chaired by US President Donald Trump, turned into a decisive support for the Iran nuclear deal, and Trump was left alone in that meeting. Except for 1 or 2 countries, nobody backed the United States. putting America into a unique historical and political isolation. The Americans gained nothing out of this United Nations General Assembly, even when US President Donald Trump was giving a speech. When at the beginning of his address, he gave much praise to his 2-year-old administration, the entire hall laughed.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with Kyaw Tin Swe, Myanmar's Minister for the Office of State Counselor in New York. The meeting came as the United Nations top human rights body agreed to set up a team to collect evidence of alleged crimes committed in Myanmar against Rohingya Muslims and others since 2011. Information that one day could be used to prosecute suspected perpetrators. The 47-member Human Rights Council voted 35-3 to create an independent mechanism, in essence an accountability body, to complement a fact-finding mission the Council previously authorized to help document alleged rights violations in Myanmar. Well, time for a short break now, but do stay with us. There's plenty more ahead.
As a fashion writer, I know how quickly trends are created and changed. In business, it's no different. To stay ahead, I needed a plan flexible enough to meet my changing communication needs. More Business 2.0 didn't just give me voice and data in one package. I got a whole lot more. With More Business, setting up my website was no problem. But I'm not just a fashion writer. I also own a home decor store before I decided to open an accessory store. With my customized More Business plan, managing my staff's communication is easy, no matter how frequently they come or they go. With 9mobile's new online self-service this week, I could adapt my plans to include this.
From 2,000 Naira, choose a business bundle, customize your staff's voice and data lines, and enjoy a variety of add-on business services. Dial *200 *5# now to subscribe. More Business.
Nigeria. We are 198 million productive people with over 900,000 square kilometers of fertile land. Nigeria's banking system has emerged strong and resilient from the 2016 crisis, which has enhanced our productivity in agribusiness and manufacturing. Come, invest in Nigeria's agribusiness, manufacturing, and value-added mining. Enjoy the Central Bank of Nigeria-led initiatives in funding interventions, stabilized exchange rate, friendly capital repatriation regime, and many more. The Central Bank of Nigeria's robust monetary policy and interventions under President Buhari's administration and position the economy to target and attain a GDP growth of 6% with a strong and growing external reserves. Come, invest in Nigeria. Nigeria, ready for business.
All right, you're watching Arise News now from our newsroom in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, and I'm Folake Adesugba. Now let's have a look at business news. Argentina's President Mauricio Macri called on Argentines to double down on efforts in the face of continuing economic challenges on Thursday. The statement during a public address in the government house comes just a day after the South American country finalized a record agreement with the International Monetary Fund for a $57.1 billion credit line. Earlier in the day, the financial markets also gave a more somber reaction to the record IMF loan package, with the peso slipping further in value. In a climate of double-digit inflation, the national currency has already lost half its value this year. Benchmarks that do little to ease concerns by international investors over Argentina's ability to meet its debts. And the Federal Reserve is raising a key interest rate for the third time this year in response to a strong U.S. economy and signaling it will likely maintain a pace of gradual rate hikes. The Fed is lifting its short-term rate benchmark for many consumer and business loans by a quarter point to a range of 2% to 2.25%. It also stuck with its previous forecast for 3 more rate increases in 2019.
The committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a quarter percentage point, bringing it to 2 to 2.25%. This action reflects the strength we see in the economy and is one more step in the process that we began almost 3 years ago of gradually returning interest rates to more normal levels. Looking ahead, today's projections show gradual interest rate increases continuing roughly as foreseen in June. The median of participants' views on appropriate policy through 2020 are unchanged since the June meeting. These projections play an important role in our work. My colleagues and I believe that it's useful to communicate our views on likely prospects for the economy and for policy. We are well aware, however, that the economy regularly surprises and that even the most carefully constructed projections are highly uncertain. The projections about the appropriate path of policy assume that the economy evolves broadly in line with the projections for growth, employment, unemployment, and inflation. If the economy were instead to falter, lower interest rates would be appropriate. Conversely, if inflationary pressures were to rise more than expected, higher interest rates would be appropriate. Right now, as our statement indicates, risks to the economic outlook appear roughly balanced. Readers of the FOMC statement likely noted that the committee dropped a sentence that indicated that the stance of monetary policy remains accommodative. This change does not signal any change in the likely path of policy. Instead, it is a sign that policy is proceeding in line with our expectations. We still expect, says, further gradual increases in the target range for the federal funds rate, and this expectation is reflected in the projections that I just discussed.
All right, let's dive into some lighter news and entertainment now. Childish Gambino is postponing his tour to recover after he injured his foot. Live Nation says the performer's This Is America tour will resume on the 2nd of December in Nashville, Tennessee. The tour promoter says tickets for the rescheduled shows will be honored at the new dates. Gambino, whose real name is Donald Glover, injured his foot during a concert in Dallas last week. The injury is also forcing Gambino to cancel his appearance at the Austin City Limits Music Festival in October. He will still perform at the Voodoo Music Plus Arts Experience in New Orleans later in the month. The Grammy winner's hits include Redone and This Is America. And Rashida Jones is a new mom, and she's managed to keep that a secret for a month. The actress and her boyfriend, Vampire Weekend lead singer Ezra Koenig, welcomed a son named Isaiah Jones Koenig in late August. It's the couple's first child. US Weekly was the first to report the birth. All right, let's have a look at all the action brewing in sports now. Former European champions Germany will host the 2024 European Championships after beating Turkey by 12 votes to 4 from UEFA's Executive Committee. After a two-horse race for Euro 2024, the German Football Association's successful bid means they will host a major international tournament for the first time since the 2006 World Cup. Germany received 12 votes from the 17-member committee, with 4 opting for Turkey and 1 abstention. The 4-time world champions have won the Euros 3 times, in 1972, in 1980 and 1996, and last staged the continental competition as West Germany in 1988. And European Football Administrative Body, UEFA, has announced the use of the controversial VAR video assistant referee technology in the Champions League from next season, as well as being brought in from the playoff stage of European club football's premier competition. VAR will also be used in the 2020 European Championship, next year's UEFA Super Cup, and in the Europa League from the 2020 to 21 season. In addition, it will be used in the finals of the new Nations League competition from 2021. The decision follows the introduction of VAR at this summer's World Cup in Russia, which was largely deemed to be a success. The Premier League has not brought in the technological aid to referees, but it was introduced in the FA Cup last season. The top divisions in Spain and France started using it this season, while Germany's Bundesliga and Serie A in Italy has already introduced it. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise News, but do stay with us on the channel. I'm Folake Adesugba. Be sure to tweet at us, and we would love to hear your opinion concerning everything that's happening. But for now, that's goodbye, and thank you for watching.